So, sorry for the delay. Time for class. Welcome back. Hope you had a good break. All right, so should mostly have the people we had last term, with the exception here. And is Josh here? You guys don't know Josh, potentially. He should be here, but he's not. He is our London friend who is kind of on an accelerated course here. So, not sure where Josh is. Oh, he does fly in today? He didn't let me know that. So, all right. So, everybody get a syllabus that's here? How many people we got here? One, two. So, watch my numbering system. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, page 14. So help me remember this order. Maybe I should write it down. Page 14. Page 14. Josh. And then finally, who else was in? Kimmy. Yeah. Okay. So now, give me a number between 3 and 8. 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Matt, odd or even?
Even.
Even it is. Number 2. Number 4. Let's see, you were 5. 8. 10. 12. And then 14, 16. Okay, so here's the story. This is one of your required books, and I learned about this book when I was at a conference in Hawaii by the author. So it was the Association for Private Enterprise Education, and John Allison spoke there, and then he made it was really an impressive speech about the book and about the concept, and he made the offer that anybody who wanted to use it in class, he would donate the books for it. So I jumped on that opportunity. I gave them out the last time I taught a couple years ago. And so this is my remaining stock. That's why I didn't have one for all of you. So it was through, as you saw, complete randomization. So everybody in theory was required to purchase it. So that is considered just a pure gift from me, but from John Allison, the author. Okay. And the book should be pretty cheap. Did anybody price it out on Amazon or anything? It's probably pretty cheap. Okay, well, you can now sell yours because you have that one. I bet you can find a buyer in this room somewhere, would be my guess. So we've created a little marketplace for those of you who have it already. You don't know how much you spent? Is that what you said? Yeah, I'd kind of be surprised if there's not used versions for $10 or something. So that's one of our books, and it's kind of, it gets into some sophisticated topics, but in a very straightforward layman's way. You don't have to be an econ person to get it. So that's why I chose this book for some of the topics we go through here. Second book, I do not have any free copies for you for, but again, should be very cheap. Did you buy it? Is that what you just pulled out? Oh, did anybody check pricing on this one? Yeah, maybe even down to $4, $5, $7, I would guess. So both will be pretty inexpensive. Some great lessons in here about investing and things to watch out for. So that's our other, again, written for the layman. It's not a big econ text by any stretch. And then, of course, your main requirement is this book. Well, you'll have the e-text version with the My Econ Lab. The good news is for most of you who took money in banking, this is still the same book. So you should, if the publisher didn't pull the whammy on me, you should be able to go into Blackboard, click the link, and you're in. If you bought this last semester, it's the same book. Okay? So that's the good news. So there's a couple freebies, I guess, for some people. But Jake, you got loaded with the purchase of everything. So pull out your wallet. But they won't be too bad. Those are, like I said, pretty inexpensive reads. Okay, so questions on the materials. I kind of jumped the gun just because I wanted to do the distribution of those books. So my contact information's up top, some office hours, but as you know, you can drop in, set up a time anytime. So course description explores the financial system, financial institutions, and the primary forces which affect them. So this class, as opposed to money and banking, is going to be a little bit more on different types of forces that impact the financial system and some of the details there. So an emphasis on instruments and interactions of money and capital markets and the analysis of firms for portfolio management. So we're going to get into a little more details. The chapters that we skipped for the money and banking class is what we're going to hack in and dive into. So it's going to be less of a Federal Reserve focus and more of the financial system focus and the behavior and interactions of firms therein. So course objectives. Upon successful completion, you should be able to demonstrate knowledge of terms related to investment finance, apply the basic theories of financial markets and critical thinking and problem solving. So there's especially more emphasis in this class on that. We'll be doing kind of critical evaluation of both of these books and look at the incentives of agents and people that are related to them and how they think and have discussion about those. So that's a lot of the emphasis there with critical thinking and problem solving. Demonstrate an awareness of the role of government and financial markets, complete financial calculations for estimating the financial benefits of an investment, identify the effects of government policy on financial markets, and demonstrate an understanding of the composition of global capital markets. So we'll have my Econ Lab. I don't think I'll run through all of that, but similar to last time, I got rid of the quizzes that we had before. So you'll work the study plan first to open up your first test attempt. So similar to what we did for money and banking. And then there's homework problems that are separate. So you have the homework problems and the tests, and then we'll have some in-class, the midterm final type of setup. Actually, with this one, the midterm was just because we had that little midterm mishap before, so we'll actually just have the final for this class, which is what I intended to do with the other class. That midterm we took, remember, replaced the My Econ Lab test. So this one, it'll be all My Econ Lab tests for that first chunk, and then there'll be a final at the end. Video project. I had a reflection paper here. So I hope you don't mind, but I really enjoyed your guys' project, so that looked like you had a lot more fun than writing a paper, so I thought we will do video project part 2, the electric boogaloo, for investment finance now. So same type of setup, 2 to 4 minute videos. You can get in groups, you can do it by yourself or you can get into groups up to 3. So let's see. I never did get yours posted yet to YouTube either. I need to do that. So the outline gives you the 8 sections. This is not a 8-week course. It's a 16-week or the full semester. So when you see the word week in your mind, you can just think module or section. So we'll be covering it in 8 different sections as we move through time, and we'll have the dates and whatnot announced. So section 1 is what we'll be kicking off probably today. We'll get into some of that. Is chapters 6 and 7 of this book. So we will jump if your mind is a little froggy. In fact, maybe I'll pull this up. Show you how we organize the two. This thing will cooperate. think it's still thinking about life. Maybe. There we go. Okay, so this is from the book. This is how I organized it. So when we did money and banking, we went through chapters 1 through 5. So we kind of stopped at the behavior of interest rates. We did a little bit with present value calculations and that sort of thing. And then we're going to take the next step a little deeper into that, thinking about risk and term structure and some other concepts. And then we'll get more into these theories of, do we get information from markets that we think is reliable? If the price of Apple stock today is $113 a share, is that the value that reflects the share of Apple stock? I mean, is it efficient? Are the prices reflecting real values and that sort of thing? So to get a little bit more theoretical here, let's see, I got to remember my own notes here. So then we've got, the non-highlighted. So an economic analysis of financial structure, economic analysis of financial regulation. So again, we're more policy theory, thinking through those things rather than the nuts and bolts. Remember in money and banking, we said, okay, here's the balance sheet of a real bank and debits and credits. We kind of worked through some of those nitty-gritty details. We're going to stay a little bit more theoretical in this class and thinking through the issues they have. Financial crisis, non-bank finance, derivatives. Now we're going to get into some fun stuff with hedging and futures markets and why some of those instruments are desirable. We'll also talk about why those maybe help lead to the financial crisis in some cases, because people got into stuff that they didn't really understand. Or they had belief in economic models that had assumptions they didn't understand, that they were actually more robust than what they were. And so they tended to jump on the bandwagon, and the economic models really couldn't predict what was going to happen due to just too much information being out there. So then conflicts of interest. Wells Fargo's the new case study out there. Who remembers what Wells Fargo did? We had a couple things. What was their deal? Their big black eye in the market. Yeah, the fake accounts thing. So they had a structure set up so that employees were incentivized to get more accounts. And so it led ultimately to fraud, where people were creating accounts for customers that didn't even ask for them, filling out applications in some cases. So complete fraud in some cases, maybe just a little too much pressure, more so than what Wells would have otherwise done in their business model. And so it created behaviors that weren't good long-term because it came back to bite them in the butt. And so those sorts of conflicts of interest can, we'll look at some other cases. Okay, so then we jump from there into stuff we hadn't did in money and banking. We kind of neglected the foreign exchange market, something that we did do in macroeconomic principles of macro with some of the exchange rates and stuff. So we'll rehash a lot of that. We're not going into those chapters with me expecting you to remember much of anything out of principles of macro. I should be careful when I say that, because maybe I expect you to know a little tiny bit, but we'll look at currency markets, and again, some hot buttons going on right now is China, with Trump coming into office and being a little bit confrontational with China and how they've handled their currency, the yuan, over time. So there should be some interesting current events and things that we'll work through there. And then let's see, I think are we done with that? I thought we had, no, because we don't do that. Yeah, I guess we end on international. That doesn't seem right. I mean, that's what I have in the book. That is right. Woo! We'll be done. Okay. So we end on that international stuff. All right. So sprinkled it. So that was a textbook run through. But as we get into some of these topics, we're going to start in on the textbook, chapters 6, 7. So if you go to section 1 and then go to section 2, we've got chapters 8, 9, and then we start to filter in the Skousen book. So we're going to start with this one. And so part of your section 2 is starting off with chapter 1 and chapter 2. And we're going to be doing stuff like bullet bandit type of stuff for reading the chapter. And then we'll have discussion in class. So you guys will post your answers to Blackboard prior to class starting. And then we'll have a discussion on the chapters in these books. So that's what we'll begin with section 2. And then as you see, section 3, we've got just one chapter out of the textbook, chapter 11. And then we start to get into chapters 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the Skousen book. These are short chapters, by the way, and pretty easy reads. Here's the topic one: has Wall Street become another Las Vegas? And it just reads kind of like a novel. Pretty short pages. It's not, for those of you at entrepreneurial, it's not Atlas Shrugged, so you won't be getting into that. Those of you who haven't had entrepreneurial, don't worry about it. We'll get there soon enough, or you can ask some of the other people. I think that chapter 8 wraps up that book, or as far as we're going to go. I can't remember if I hit every chapter on that. And then section 4, chapter 13 for the main text, but then we're in 1 through 4 of the Allison book, Free Market Cure. And then we'll be doing that same thing. So although this semester, different than maybe money and banking, we're going to have a lot more discussion in class about topics and kind of round table. You guys come to the table with your stuff read and hopefully learn some things that way. I think that's kind of all I wanted to say, just kind of how that's going to feather throughout the time. Questions? All right, well, I think that's it for the syllabus. All right, I'm going to turn this thing back on. Might come back to that or might not. Okay, I think so I think I got everybody who's listening. All right, so for the benefit of those who didn't come fresh out of money and banking, as well as you dusting off the cobwebs from money and banking, what's a bond? How would you describe a bond? Let's see, what number did we leave off the last time? What did you say, 7? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Joe! Yeah. What's a bond? A loan from where to where? I just didn't hear you.
A loan to government or
loan to a government or a bank. Okay, and who's making the loan?
The investor.
And who's that?
It can be a company, an individual person.
Okay, so it could be anybody, right? I just want to make sure that it's not not anybody that wouldn't be in the normal system here. So if we think about the financial markets, I should have yeah, let me do that. There's a good, I do like that. Oh, let's see if I can remember. Maybe I'll just do it on this. Okay, go back. Let's This, which is what, channel 2, maybe this would be better. Pull it up. All right. Here we go.
I'm gonna go to Singapore. That's Barbara. Just don't know what you want for that.
It's kind of freaking. All right, so
I don't know what else to do. I don't want to
let's
skip
do this. I like this
Hotspot.
graph. I think this kind of helps bring things together. So we've got direct finance and indirect finance. So lenders and savers, households, businesses, government, foreigners, borrowers, spenders, businesses, government, households, foreigners. How are those two lists different? The order, good. So they're the same players, right? So there's the list of four are the same, but the devil's in the details. They are varying by order. Why? Does anybody remember why? The amount that they do, yeah, it was the volume of trade. So on the lender side, we're primarily thinking households in kind of the market system. So we've got households and businesses and governments are all various agents in our economy. Where's my bag? Thank you. That's right, I took it out for macro class. Never mind, I don't have it in there. All right, so we've got our circular flow is what I was looking for. I'll give you the old school method here. We got the output market, right? GDP, we've got dollars flowing over to businesses in exchange for goods and services. And that's in the output market. The households own all of the resources in the economy, land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, and they are willing to sell those things, land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship, to the businesses for some money. Money like what? Wages, salaries, rents, and as far as the capital market goes, interest is kind of a big one for this class, right? So we've got money going back from businesses in payment for the resources. That's all in the resource market. So we got the market for final goods and services. We got the resource market. That's our basic kind of free market of the economy. And in the MyEcon lab, you guys have my sheets for this if you don't have them from other classes, and I can email them out to you too. They might also be on Blackboard. And then we've got the government. Dun, dun, dun. Maybe I should put Trump Tower down here, I guess, but we got, that kind of looks like a jail cell, and maybe that's appropriate. It was supposed to be pillars for the White House, but so the government is here, and the government ends up buying some of these resources too. So they end up intervening into the output market. They also need some labor and some capital to run the government, and so they pay for those resources with some money. Of course, they sell out some money through taxes, right? So we got taxes going out. We've got taxes being derailed. The businesses have to pay some sales tax that ultimately, as we learned from microclass, is shared with the households. So we've got taxes coming in. So we've got the government spending money and buying money. They're kind of running a business, if you will, or their organization requires funds. We're pretty far from a business, but again, maybe Trump's business experience will help bring some of that to the White House. I have my doubts. But even a nonprofit organization is thinking about funds in, funds out, right? So households are consumers, government, business, that's this list. Once the plate of spaghetti got a little bit bigger, then we have the rest of the world up here. We got China. We got we're selling some of our products are going to China, not just, maybe I'll do a little variation here. So we've got some exports going out to the rest of the world. And then the rest of the world is paying for those. And they're selling some stuff as well through the form of imports. So we got exports and imports coming into the system. So there's the world marketplace, all in a nice nutshell. That's why I try to make it a little neater with the sheets that we've been going over in various classes. But that's all these guys are. So in terms of this class, we're honing into the function of lending and borrowing, right? Not all households, some of those Dave Ramsey fans out there, they don't have any debt, right? They might have savings, so they're still effectively a lender, but they're not a borrower. So when we look at the economy all across the board, what somebody borrowed is what somebody else lended to them, right? But there's different players within each one. And it turns out the biggest is the households, next business. And over here, the biggest borrowers are businesses, then government, then households. So that's kind of important to conceptualize going into the material to think about who makes up the financial markets. The correct answer is everybody, but when it comes down to demand and supply curves, there's some dominant players on either side that we need to take into a little bit bigger consideration if we're on the lender side. Okay, so questions or comments there? Is that helping to shake a few cobwebs out? All right, don't be afraid to speak up here. All right, so then we get the indirect market or indirect finance. So if we go and put our money in a bank, then the bank decides who's going to go where with it. With financial markets, I was going to Wall Street and buying a bond. So if I bought a GM bond, that transaction was Russ McCullough household buying General Motors bond. It was a direct exchange. Russ McCullough cuts a check for $10,000. GM gets a check for $10,000 minus the brokerage fee, of course, right? So we have a little bit of fee in between. But if I do an over-the-counter exchange, those fees are really next to nothing now with different types of markets that we have in place. So the indirect market puts that firm in between us, the intermediary. And so that sets up this banking system. And why might I like that as a consumer? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Why might I like to have Wells Fargo in the middle here? So instead of me going straight to GM with $10,000, I'm choosing to go up to Wells Fargo, and then maybe Wells Fargo will give it to GM. Why would I do something like that? For what? Risk? Yeah, that would be the reason. So, if I go up to Wells Fargo with it and GM defaults, assuming that didn't jeopardize Wells Fargo, my $10,000 is still good with them, right? So it's absolutely right on with risk. Now, if I do that, what's true about my return? Would I expect it to be larger or smaller than going directly to GM? Smaller, right? So that's that risk-return trade-off that I'm going to be getting rid of some risk, but I have to pay for it. It's not free. The more risk you take, the more the reward is, the return, expected return. So if you choose to get rid of that risk, you're going to have to be willing to accept less of a return. So that's our primary use of intermediaries. It also allows us to use our, what we're best at, our comparative advantage. So I don't want to, let's say I'm good at fixing cars, I'm a mechanic or something. I don't want, I should use my buddy's, he's a boiler. He works on huge air conditionings and commercial units. So he's a commercial, he's got his license for plumbing and working on boilers. But he's been dabbling in the financial markets, right? But probably his comparative advantage lies in continuing to do boilers. And so in order to be successful in figuring out who to invest in over here, you got to spend a lot of time, money, effort, research, et cetera, to see which companies I should invest in. And so that's another separate reason than the risk reward, is that allows me to be doing more boilers, more of what I'm good at, where my opportunity cost lies, and doing my comparative advantage. And then you've got these Wall Street companies or other people that want to learn about the financial market, spend all the time and resources to do that. They do what they're good at, I do what I'm good at, and we trade. And the trade is really coming through that brokerage service that they're offering by finding those investments for us. So questions or comments there? All right, so we do a little bit of both with direct and indirect finance. Oh, I got this thing up. Let's see, let's just check for two. Yeah, this is a good one. Oh, I see. Okay, so that stays up there. This screen is blipping on me. So different types of lending institutions is good to kind of review again. So we've got commercial banks, savings and loan. I know this is a little unclear. I don't think I'll even bother blowing it up for you. Credit unions, life insurance companies, and fire and casualty companies, pension funds. What's a pension fund? Retirement. So what kind of company has a pension fund? Kind of a big, what'd you say, Tag? Blue chip. Yeah, usually some of the bigger companies, they're kind of dying. They're kind of a dying animal, but there's still old ones out there. Also labor unions. So where they've unionized across different companies, they'll have pension funds. And so it used to be a lot bigger than it was, but it still takes up a pretty good chunk. This data shows the year 2000, pensions having 4,355, I assume this is in billions, so 4,000 billion is how much? A trillion, so $4 trillion in pension funds, 4.3, but 10 years later it's only 4.5. So while the pension funds grew, look at the growth from 1990 to 2000, it was 1.6 trillion to 4.3 trillion. So that's where pensions were still around, getting bigger. And now not so much. Okay, and then finally, finance companies. Anybody have any come to mind? Or state and local governments, I should skip them. So we got governments getting involved in borrowing money. Finance companies. What would be an example of that? So not JP Morgan Chase, not Wells Fargo, but they have a little, and it's a small player. Notice the numbers here are pretty small relative to commercial banks. What's that?
wealth advisement company?
No, not them. Because they're mostly on an advising of where you should put your money in terms of a portfolio. Think of some retailers that aren't banks. Now, a lot of times they end up teaming up with banks, so you might not even know this, or you might not see it, but. So anybody have Home Depot card? Victoria's Secret's card? GM Finance card?
I do.
So those are finance companies. So in other words, they're usually started off as retail companies that wanted to have a charge account. So they have a charge account for their customers coming in, and then so they kind of almost accidentally got into the lending business, and they got bigger and bigger and bigger over time. It started really, really small, and then they did start to get pretty big over time. So those are finance companies. Now, another growing part of this that I believe I believe falls into this. How many of you seen some ads for Quicken Loans? Rocket Loan Mortgage, they have those commercials all over. They just overtook the largest bank for home loans now. So those are finance companies. This is kind of an interesting thing that's happened from the financial crisis, is that banks have not been wanting to loan out money, and that left an angle for these finance companies to come in. So Quicken Loans, and then there's another one. Quicken Loans is Rocket Mortgage, and then there's one other big player. And it turns out, guess where they get their money from? Banks, yeah. So we have kind of this double intermediary going on where the finance company is kind of processing and getting all of you in the front door, and then they're getting their money from Wells Fargo or from other banks. So the banks aren't lending as directly as much, but we've got this new animal on the block in terms of home mortgages that is getting banks' money out the window. Of course, the bank, just like we did with me versus the other thing, adding another layer in there takes away some of their profit, but hopefully lowers some of their risk because they're thinking. Okay, then we got mutual funds and money market mutual funds. So those places can be in that. And this was financial assets. So we don't need to talk about regulations right now. Of course, you guys within my Econ Lab have access to all these PowerPoints, remember? This is good to just kind of motivate things. My screen keeps jumping. Luckily, it doesn't matter for you guys, but it's kind of hard for me. Okay, so what kind of interest rates we got out there? Well, we got all kinds. Government bonds, core bonds, and then we have a whole laundry list that we'll do probably not today yet, well, maybe we'll get there, of different grades of corporate bonds. So over time, what drove this in the late 70s, this little spike of interest rates? Remembers that? So we got kind of this little mountain here, it looks like to me, with interest rates coming right up, late 70s, peaking 80s. What was going on?
Oil.
Oil, yes. Oil was part of it. What else was associated with the oil? Yes, so oil's shortage, we had kind of the OPEC deal, and inflation in general. So, but it wasn't because of oil, it was because of the Federal Reserve with some of their monetary policy. So that's what caused that. There's a link between interest rates and inflation. The Fisher formula, what's that? The nominal interest rate can be thought of to be equal to, Matt?
Real plus inflation.
Inflation, good. So there's your answer. If inflation's high, that's going to cause nominal interest rates to be high. So that's what's pushing this up here. Whereas the real rate of interest might be more stable if we rewrite this equation as the nominal rate minus the inflation rate. That one might be a little bit different. That one could be stable while this is going up, if this is going up. The real rate of return is what we think rational investors will be thinking about. They'll behave differently if the inflation rates are high. And they're starting to creep up. We're starting to see a little upward pressure on the price level here recently. All right, let's see. Stock market versus the loan market. So what's the difference? Stocks versus bonds? Stocks, you own the company, right? You have a fractional interest in the company. If they pay dividends, then you would have a fractional interest in a dividend. If you're just in it for upward appreciation, hoping that the price is going to go higher, then you have a share of the company as the prices go up. So here's the Dow Jones Industrial Average. We've got the S&P, Russell 3000, all these types of indices that can help look at stock prices. And then this is a little bit on money. I'll kind of skip through that. Interest rates and money growth. So part of the money in banking was to think about the relationship, both long-term and short-term, of money and how that can influence interest rates and then also ultimately inflation. Here's our government. You can see how they run their business. What does deficit mean? Deficit, not debt, but deficit. Let's see, where did we leave off with Kaylee? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10. Kinda. I don't like the word owe.
Borrow.
You do need to borrow because why? Tax revenues aren't high enough to cover what? What you spent. That's the word you were missing. When you said, oh, it's kind of like borrowing. It's not necessarily borrowing, but we spent money. So we have government spending and tax revenues. And so if government spending exceeds tax revenues, the budget has a deficit, and that means they need the money from somewhere, so they go and borrow it. So that's the big connection to financial markets. This is really fiscal policy, though, right? Because they choose what they're going to spend. They choose what tax rates are going to be. So in theory, those are both choice variables, which means in theory, if they had their act together, they could, in theory, balance the budget. It's possible, believe it or not, that some of you have personal finance class, to not spend more than you make. It's really possible to do that. That's not impossible. The government kind of thinks it's impossible, but it's actually not. So that's a fiscal policy issue. That fiscal policy of choosing to run a deficit forces them, unless they go bad on their debts and not spend some of the money, if they don't sacrifice spending, they have to borrow it. And so that leads to this funding of the deficits through borrowing and issuing out government bonds. Those government bonds end up competing with other private dollars. So I brought up the GM bond before. If GM's looking to raise $10,000 and Obama's looking to raise $10,000, all of a sudden we have competition for my $10,000, right? Should I give it to the government? Should I give it to GM? Well, GM's, they've had some bankruptcy issues in the past. The government's always paid their bills. Oh, and they have the luxury of being able to print off their money. So maybe even though the GM bond pays 8% and the government bond pays a lousy 3%, that's not enough for me anyway to say it's not enough of a risk premium, which is one of the hot buttons. So I did officially say a Chapter 6 thing, risk premium, for me to not buy the government bond. And so now my money went to the government instead of GM, and so we have the potential for crowding out. So we want to think about these agents competing for private dollars, and that could be an important result. Okay, foreign exchange market, which we will get into this chapter, because this is chapter 1, kind of generic for all the chapters. So this is the exchange rate. This only goes through 2011, so kind of old data. I think this is actually my chapter 3, not even the most recent out of the book. Dollar been appreciating or depreciating lately? Last year, I'm not asking for current data, but in general, has the dollar been strong or weak relative to other currencies? It's been strong. So we've seen appreciation. The rest of the world's been kind of lagging behind our recovery. And so the dollar has been kind of a safer place for people to put money. And so that's ended up strengthening the dollar. So the dollar buys, if you want to go to Euro Disney or something, or head over to the Brexit as they're leaving, you can go in, you can buy the British pound at a little bit better rate than you used to a couple years ago. So when the dollar can buy more foreign currency, we say that the dollar's appreciated. Another good place to go is Mexico, because a couple years ago, it was closer to 12 pesos per dollar. Now it's about 19 pesos per dollar. So, and just recently, the Mexican peso took another hit. So they might even be down to like 20. So you can almost buy double pesos for the dollar. So that's how the dollar's fared, and that enters into some of the stuff towards the end of the book. And that looks like a good place to call it a day. So